Welcome back to an exciting edition of DTNsights. I am your host, Rennie Vandeweghe, serve as general manager of the weather business at DTN. And I've got a guest that I've been very excited about since we got this scheduled, Matthew Heinze, who serves as an emergency management coordinator at the Texas Department of Transportation. Matthew, how are you doing today?
Howdy, Rennie. We're doing great down here in Texas. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to visit with you about our weather down here and all the support.
Wonderful. Well, this is exciting. I would love to start kind of about you, how you got into a career both in emergency management and then into the Department of Transportation world. What's your career path been like? How did you kind of end up in this awesome role you have today?
Well, it's been a very out as a maintenance road hand, so a Tech 1 in our industry in a rural part of the state where I grew up out in West Texas near San Angelo. And then just through opportunities, I was able to move around the state and ended up in Austin and for a few years there as an equipment operator, and then went back out to the San Angelo district as a maintenance section supervisor, and then came back to the Austin district as a special crews supervisor. And through all of those processes, I was heavily involved with emergency management. Weather was always one of the key factors. We were either responding to it or planning around it. So the long range forecasts were really important on our schedules and plans and maintenance. And then a few years ago, I had an opportunity to come up to the TxDOT maintenance division, and really excited about that because we get to support all 25 districts across the state. And my initial role there was providing that support through some maintenance assessment program, and heavily involved with the emergency management on a state level and the coordination with our external partners at other agencies and other partners, and working with them was really intriguing and really interesting. And then I was blessed to have the opportunity to move up into my current role. 5 years ago now, I guess, this summer. And my current role, I'm the maintenance support section director. With that, I've got a myriad of things underneath me. The TxMap program that I was part of, I oversee that. The statewide radio system for our agency, oversee that. And then, of course, obviously emergency management, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And then also I have the vegetation management group that we do statewide vegetation management and provide support to the districts with training. And then also, last but certainly not least, is our pit and quarry safety program to keep the traveling public safe around any quarries that may be across the state. So a lot of stuff there. But I know we're going to talk more about the emergency management side of it. So I'll pause there, Rennie, for your next question.
What is it? I mean, that's an amazing amount of responsibility that you have. What's a day in the life like for you, or is no 2 days the same essentially for you?
So as any emergency manager will tell you, no 2 days are alike. But typically my day starts with, I'll typically get up, and one of the first things I do is I'm checking my inbox. If I haven't been called earlier in the morning or overnight, I'm checking my inbox for any type of information and responses we may have had out in one of our districts. And then also obviously checking the weather, various sources on weather, and looking at that for the current conditions. And then if we maybe had some severe weather, see if there's any reports on any type of damage or anything associated with the system that may have just passed. And then from there, it's just kind of the typical mundane, get to the office and start going through emails and processing some of that stuff. And a lot of my time is spent with the networking and meeting with folks on various levels. County judges, city officials, partners in emergency management at local and state level, and then also the other activities I have, with the radio system and the TxMap program, and I do have a branch manager that oversees the vegetation and pits and quarries, so I'm not daily involved with those, but I do have a pulse on them and doing that. And then with the emergency management, we're constantly getting notified throughout the day, 24 hours, 7 days a week of any type of incident that's in the state. And so a lot of that is I'm combing through that along with my staff to see if there's anything we need to pass along, any information that we need to pass along to the 25 districts.
What's really interesting about Texas, it's one of my favorite states to visit, it's massive, obviously. It's a massive state. The diversity in the climate is really incredible. And you could have days, and I've seen this, where it's 90 degrees on the southeast coast and you have a blizzard in Dumas or something, right? In the way northwest. And so you have haboob dust storms, and you have hurricanes, ice storms, floods, you name it, it happens in Texas. What kind of challenges does that present when, you literally have every type of weather event or natural disaster, even earthquakes, that could occur in your entire territory? What challenges do you think that makes that are unique to Texas?
So it is a very diverse state on ecosystem and the weather. So, you hit it on the head there, Rennie, we can have a blizzard, and we have a couple of years ago, we had winter weather up in our Panhandle region, the Amarillo, Lubbock area. At the same time, we were facing a tropical weather threat to our coastal districts and everything in between. And we tend to see our biggest one that we keep getting impacted here in the state that's the most constant is the wildfire threat. And the behaviors of the fire in relation to the weather, the high winds and the relative humidity and all those factors into it. So that's a very common threat that we pretty much see 12 months out of the year. You say the diversity, and I mentioned the ecosystem of it. And yeah, the blowing dust in West Texas, we can have those storms pop up. We've had really great luck with some of the weather forecasting to at least give us, a 24-hour or a little bit longer, maybe heads up on, hey, there's going to be some high winds in this area. And based on, moisture and everything, you're looking at some dust storms. And so we'll start taking some proactive measures, notifying the public and looking at our operations that, maintenance operations, we shouldn't be closing a lane today because there's going to be a chance of blowing dust. And then we go to the other far extreme of East Texas, where we have the large pine trees and the impacts that thunderstorms and tornadoes can have on those, and the damage, blocking roads with those trees, and having crews, pulse on the weather, knowing that they may have a call out later in the evening because there's going to be a system that pushes through with some winds or flooding issues, that they'll need to have their crews ready to respond. Talking about the flooding, obviously we've had some very tragic events here in Texas related to flooding, and that's always on everybody's mind. And any of that early warning we can get and monitoring is always beneficial. And our TxDOT crews getting out there, pre-positioning barricades, having crews assigned, if it's going to be after hours, if they need to stay late, start an overnight shift. Any of that stuff is always great to have the information ahead of time instead of having to do a reaction to it. So yeah, very, very diverse, a lot of stuff going on.
It's really interesting. And I think this is true maybe across sort of the Great Plains, but Texas for sure. It's not a weather forecast. It is weather forecasts in a single day because they're so varied. How do you work through, gathering the information and insights as a forecast, and then you mentioned you have a bunch of districts. How does that sort of disseminate out? Because within the districts, there's probably some commonality in a day versus you looking at that extreme scenario where you had, a tropical threat and a blizzard in the same forecast, same day. How do you disseminate that information and ensure that kind of every threat is covered statewide?
Yes, so excellent question there. So what we have started doing about 5 years ago, we were getting a lot of weather data from various sources. Well, of course, we're huge partners with National Weather Service, very in tune with them and their local offices as well. And we were also getting weather information from the Texas Division of Emergency Management. And we were getting all this information, but is it really getting out to the folks in the field? And so I started an email, kind of a daily Matthews weather email type deal. And in that, I take that information. And now, of course, with our partnership with DTN, we're taking that information as well, putting it into an email. And then we're highlighting some of our other job functions in there as well, as far as, this event, we're going to have a tracking number and we're going to need to track cost on it. And so we're providing that information to the districts and divisions that are going to be responding. And then I like to kind of break it down by our regions or our districts and say, hey, this area needs to be on a lookout because you've got severe weather, and some little friendly reminders in there of some stuff for the districts to be watching and monitoring. And then also their notification process to provide them a reminder, hey, if you have these type of impacts, you need to notify these departments at the agency, and then just attaching, the awesome presentations that each of our weather partners puts together and putting that in one package and getting it sent out. So I'll typically do that every morning, depending on what the weather is, or sometimes when we're getting it, we may have some follow-up emails, and some may be directed specifically to a region or a district that's going to have specific impacts. So yeah, a lot of information going out there. And of course, we always encourage our districts to, have their own source as well. Like I mentioned, the local National Weather Service, working with those teams there. DTN has done an outstanding job when we've had some major events that the districts will ask for pinpoint specific forecasts for an area. And that's been really, really helpful that we can get that, in the next hour, this is when it's going to hit you, versus an email that was sent out that morning that says, hey, in the afternoon, you're going to get severe weather. So really, really great partnership all around.
Yeah, it's always evolving throughout the day, no doubt about it. Is there a weather event type or a peril that maybe gets you more on edge than another? If you see it in the forecast, that gets you like, oh man, here we go.
I don't know that there's a specific one. I think they're all they each have their own unique threats. Winter weather is a big one here in Texas. Our panhandle area, they're used to it, and it's not uncommon. And they have the knowledge and the expertise, experience to respond to that, no problem. So when we get weather events up there, winter weather events, I'm not too worried about that. I know they've got it under control. Some of the other areas of the state, whenever we start looking at winter weather events, we definitely do like to be in constant contact with them, just checking on their needs, because we do get winter weather all the way down to Brownsville and deep South Texas, but the staff down there, not their fault, but they may only get to see snow or ice once every 10 years.
Yeah.
And so that staff down there doesn't have that expertise just by the occurrence of the event. So we like to monitor all the districts, but definitely those types of events, when we start seeing snow and ice threats, roughly drawing a line on the state, if it starts getting into our metro areas or below Interstate 20, we're definitely very much closely monitoring that. The severe weather, thunderstorms with tornadoes, those always get everybody heightened, because while we know that where the threat risk might be, it's not a zeroed in area. It can be a very broad area and very impactful. If it's hits a rural unpopulated area, and it may be just a few homes and not a major impact on population, versus one that may hit in a metro urban area where you've got a lot of folks concentrated and a lot of impacts there. Those are very much monitored and looked at equally. Is important. The wildfire threats, that's always a huge one that we're very much closely monitoring. Again, we bring in our partners on that one that really support us, as well as Texas A&M Forest Service, and they're always feeding us information on what they're seeing in the fuel loading in certain areas. And so that's, again, information that gets shared out to all the districts that are impacted. Tropical weather, as we're going into that season right now, that's one that always gets people up on high alert. And just with the modeling and everything in the nature of the storms, we've just conducted our statewide hurricane workshop with all 25 districts and the support divisions to go over plans and hear stories and after actions and share information and collaborate and make connections. And so that was really awesome to see that and be a part of it. The local districts also do their own hurricane meetings, and they'll include their local partners, be it first responders or local government. So those are always great. I enjoy attending those as well, because it's an excellent opportunity to meet on a clear day to know what everybody's roles are and limitations and support that can be provided. So, again, I don't know that there's one that we say is higher than the other. They all each kind of have their own. The flooding one is another one it can really be statewide. El Paso is an extremely dry region, but we've had flooding out there, so we're always in tune with that one, with the saturated ground or the ground conditions and how that will impact, and that hourly rainfall prediction. And our agency is really great at knowing that historical knowledge of if my area, being a former maintenance supervisor, I knew if I was getting a rain rate of a half an inch an hour for 3 hours, I knew which roads were the low water crossings were probably going to be impacted. So the maintenance supervisors do a really awesome job of monitoring that and seeing, and we've made some good strides in that area as well.
Yeah, I love that you guys do these preparedness workshops. I think the major learning I had after the horrific, horrible flooding event last year, I guess that probably was, is, here we're in this era of amazing communication, amazing technology, AI and forecasting, and we've made unbelievable advancements in forecasting and communication. And then that's a sobering reminder that we have to keep learning and keep improving. And so to continuously learn, I think, is such an important aspect of this. And don't get comfortable, because the next weather event's coming and it always throws a surprise your way. We, as meteorologists, always have a storm that you put in your bio. Mine was Hurricane Katrina. I worked Hurricane Katrina, and forever will be associated with that. Do you have a storm that is like the one that you're like, oh man, I worked that event, it was crazy, I'm proud of how we responded? What's kind of if Matthew had a bio storm, what would be your bio storm?
Well, it's kind of hard to pick just one, I guess, Rennie.
Well, okay. How about your books of storms here? Yeah, at this point, right?
We've had so many, and early on in my career, Hurricane Ike was one of the first major events I responded to, and at that time I was just an equipment operator. But we went down to our Beaumont district, which is the far southeast district in Texas, and I was part of that response crew that got to go down there, and that was very eye-opening to see and be a part of, and learned a lot of knowledge from that about what worked and what didn't work, and the impacts of a storm like that on an area. And Another big impactful tropical one was obviously Hurricane Harvey. Um, that one, TxDOT, at that time I was a manager over the special crews, and I got charged with taking all of the Austin district staff and leading them on week-long deployments. And then we'd come back for a week, and another crew with another leader would go down for a week. And that one was really impactful because we did that from September, late August, all the way to December.
Yeah.
So a very long-term response and recovery with that one. And then the other ones we talk about are the human factor ones. And some of the flooding events can be, you have that during tropical storms as well, but some of the flooding events can be the most taxing mentally, just because of what you're seeing and the devastation and everything. So, and it's so widespread, or could be widespread. So those have always been impactful. The July 4th one that we just recently had, I was actually down at the State Operations Center working the overnight shift whenever that one was unfolding. So heavily involved with that. I've responded in the field to a lot of flood events, be it in the San Angelo district and then also in the Austin district, with some of those very impactful floods in those regions, and a lot of coordination with our partners out there in the field. And there's been I've responded to some tornado events. They're relatively small in size and scope of where your operational area is, but still nonetheless very impactful with the damage and the impacts to human lives there as well. And the wildfire is another one that I always say there's a lot of stories on those as well. And being a volunteer fireman, that one always kind of hits home because I want to do a lot more and be more involved. But with my current role, I know what I can do as far as support to those folks in the field. So that's definitely one that kind of hits really close to home as well. So yeah, a lot of stories out there, and a lot of involvement. I can't say enough for all the men and women of the Texas Department of Transportation. There's been some sayings around after different various events, and HEB is one of our major grocer suppliers here in Texas, and citizens have said, and it's been posted, that we'll do great. We've got HEB and TxDOT to get us through an event. So
Love that.
Yeah, definitely some awesome people with the agency that respond to these events.
And I think there's something super valuable about, and the way your career arc grew, like being boots on the ground and seeing actual impact, is the biggest education you can have in this type of role, when you then are placed in a leadership position to, how do I plan and respond? Because you have an emotional connection and care. In the weather world, we do that sometimes. As much as media makes storm chasing out to be this like really extreme kind of craziness, I'll tell you what, the impact of that is like seeing how the atmosphere turns into, from an educational standpoint, to seeing it in action, and then afterwards surveying damage and seeing the true impact of weather really makes you respect it and then respond differently going forward. I think those are some amazing stories. What would you say that maybe the public that you serve doesn't appreciate, or a challenge that you face that maybe they don't understand is really hard to solve for in your position?
I think there's several, but one that kind of comes to the first of my mind that we always face, and it goes back to the flooding. And it's hard to understand. I understand on the meteorological side, it's also hard to predict some of that stuff. And I think a lot of folks, the not understanding the area, or maybe they do understand the area and they think, well, I crossed this road before and there was water on it, I'll be able to make it across again. And I think something that a lot of people, maybe the education is, we get those barricades out there as soon as we can. and we get those roads closed as soon as we can. But there's always going to be that window there between when that flooding actually starts to whenever we can get a crew out there to actually place the barricades. And we look around the state, and we've got 20,000 plus low water crossings, and we've got 50,000 bridges and all that the bridges can be overtopped as well. And so whenever we get to some of the rural roads on our FM system, and even going beyond the state system, and we look at county roads, a lot of times the counties are just unable due to resources. They may not be able to place a barricade out there, and the water goes over the road and the water comes back down. But I think that's something that I really wish the public would heed a little bit more and understand that, just because you crossed it with water before doesn't mean it's safe to cross it with water now, because we've seen that. All DOTs and anybody that's related in transportation has seen that, where the surface looks okay, but what's underneath that surface,
Can't see what's under
may
there.
have washed that culvert out, it may have washed that road out, and from what you see on the surface, it looks okay, and then by the time they drive into it, it's too late. They can't get out of it, and now they're either stranded and having to get rescue in there, or a very tragic event could unfold. So I think that would be something I would really wish the public could understand more, is that awareness of roads that can flood and the impacts that can have if they try to attempt to cross it.
That's incredible advice. And I think people probably don't appreciate how much your job and your team's job is education, that it doesn't necessarily need an authority to make a great decision here, right? You can take a lot of, this is true if it's slick roads, if you're flooded roads, if you see a storm in front of you. At the end of the day, as the public or as a person, I need to take the responsibility to be safe. You guys can only go so far, but you do an incredible job with it as well. I think that's really phenomenal. All right, we're going to move into the heat burst section here. Just a couple of fun questions, Matthew, to keep you on your toes. So you work for a Department of Transportation. How would you describe yourself as a driver?
So I would say I'm a pretty decent driver. We've got a lot of great programs, the Smith system that we conduct. And, one of the things is going a little bit down a rabbit hole here, Rennie, but one of the things, I was always a big back end parking person. Just my nature growing up. We always did that on the farm, more for the reason that sometimes we had to drag tractors out to get them to start, or pickups. That's how we had to get them to start. And so I was always a back end person. So that's just a little odd fun fact. But that's really key on safety. In our culture at TxDOT is really, really keen on driver safety, obviously. But I always like to share that with, friends and family and educate them. So I think one of the keys tying back into weather is knowing the weather before you leave. That real quick, as a society, we have gone so far where, you used to maybe listen to the radio and get your weather, some alerts from there. And that might've been on the hour or once or twice a day. And then, the local news, you could get it. And then we got the Weather Channel, and we could see all this stuff, 24/7. And now we've advanced all the way to where it's an app on our phone, and we can quickly open it up, see where we're at, see what's going on, see the radar right on our phone. And so I think to be a really safe driver, I would encourage the public to take that time before they're going to leave the house and just make that as one of the things is, okay, there's some cells coming this way, or what, it's clear, it's sunny, I need to remember my sunglasses and be prepared for that trip. So that's what I would encourage.
It's it's really funny. I've often said, like, it drives me nuts. I'm of the age where I lived pre-internet and post-internet, right? Kind of a fun time in life to have experienced both. I love a good old-fashioned map. I like looking at a paper map to see where I'm going and being aware and looking and like using landmarks, which as you said, you grew up rural, like everything was go to the red barn, turn right. Now you
Yep.
plug it into the phone and it just somebody talks to you, right? And tells you where to
Yep.
turn. You don't even pay attention. And I think there is an element to safety is just being aware, and aware
Yep.
of other drivers, aware of
Absolutely.
the weather, aware of what's going on the road. That's a
Absolutely,
great
Rennie.
answer.
And I want to add something to that because you bring up a good point. And this is something I do in my weather email that I send out to our 25 districts. And this is something I would encourage the public to do as well. As a society, we know where we live, we know where we work, we know our area. But do you know the area outside of that? And a lot of times in weather forecasting and meteorology, they'll say this area, it's going to cross over here. And they may not list that community that you live in or work in. And so in my weather email, I always like to put little tidbits of different cities and stuff to get people to go look at a map and understand, oh, you know what, that's about 2 hours away from me. So this is when that storm may impact me in about 2 hours versus the weather, the weather forecast didn't say my city on there. And so I'm not going to worry about it because they're not saying my town, but in a few hours, your town may be impacted or it may be in that region. So I think that's a really great point you bring up on the maps is knowing where you're at in relation to that weather.
It's funny you say that. So part of my career was teaching broadcast meteorology at Mississippi State, and my first test was a geography test. And so I was like, if you're going to be a TV weather person, and you in that world, you kind of move every 2 to 3 years as you're getting started, and you might be from Mississippi, and your first job's in Montana. It's like you got to study the maps, you got to study the locations, and being able to call out this storm is approaching the Dairy Queen at so and so. Like people reference that so much
Yeah.
differently than saying Johnson County or whatever it is. And so it is. I'm just a huge geography nerd, and I think that's really, really sage advice. Okay, so if somebody asked you they want to spend a week in Texas, going on vacation, what part would you choose?
Wow. That's difficult. And I don't want to
You don't want to
devalue any
offend.
part of the state because that's the cool thing, like we mentioned earlier in the conversation. It's so diverse and there's so many different ecosystems and stuff to go see and experience that, each part of the state has a unique thing. So me personally, I'm a West Texas guy. I like seeing the piney trees in East Texas, but I'm there about a day or so and I need to see around me.
Yep.
So I really, really enjoy, the Big Bend area, that far West Texas region has got some amazing views and beautiful area, but I don't want to be out there in July.
Oh yeah.
so
It's
so
unbelievable.
I'm kind of also a river and lake person. I currently reside in Central Texas, the Hill Country, uh, outside of Austin on the west side, and I really enjoy that area and a lot of fun stuff to do. You're an hour from Austin in the metro area, but you've also got a little bit of rural stuff. Um, Really, really good climate, tempered climate. The coast is always fun, going down to South Padre and deep South Texas. Um, Really, really pretty area down there. We have a lot of folks that like to come down and spend the winter with us, and it's a really great climate down there. And not leaving out the metro areas, the Houstons, the San Antonios, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. So much to do and see in those cities as well, and just really awesome. And then the Panhandle Plains, a lot of unique stuff up in those areas as well. So there's just such a diverse. We have the canyon up there. That's it's the
Palo
Grand
Duro.
Canyon of Texas, and it's
Yep.
such a beautiful area. So there's so many things to see across the state that it's hard to pick one region that I would say, hey, you have to see this. I would just encourage people that if it's a week, you're not going to see it all. So plan another trip and come back for another week
Yeah, I
and see
love it.
another area. But it is big. So I have some friends up in the Northeast, and they always give me fits about. They're like, well, our commute is 15 minutes, and an hour is a long drive for me. And I'm like, well, my commute is an hour, and a long drive for me is about 12 hours.
That's right. It's funny. Yeah, Palo Duro. So I've storm chased quite a bit and have spent a lot of time in Texas. The town I've stayed the most in Texas is Canyon, Texas, the town of
Yep.
Canyon, and West Texas A&M University there. There's a great little barbecue joint. I don't even think it's still open. Where I live in Nebraska, they opened a new barbecue place called Canyon Joe's Barbecue. And I went in there one day. I was like, this is a pretty Texas flavored barbecue. I was like, is there any relation to Canyon, like Canyon, Texas? The guy said, that's where I grew up. I was like,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
that's really, really cool. I've spent a lot of time there. And I said, I used to go to a place called Fat Boy's Barbecue. And the guy, so I knew Fat Boy, his name was like Alan or something like that. I was like, what a world here. But
Yep.
that's my final question for you. If I go on a tour of barbecue, I do love barbecue, if you can't tell by my physique here. What's the one spot I got to hit if I go to find Texas barbecue?
Ooh,
That's a hard question.
again, there's a lot of different barbecues in Texas. It's kind of unique. There is definitely the Texas barbecue, but there's different influences on it. So you get into East Texas and you start getting more of the barbecue with the sauce and the different flavors with that. And then you get to Central Texas, we have got some outstanding, amazing barbecue places there as well. That it's I don't know. I don't know that I have just one specific one I can name. They're really all great, and it varies. I really like the mom and pop ones that maybe kind of started out in somebody's house and now they've got a little, stand on the side of the road. There's some really awesome ones. The old established ones, and we're getting a lot of new ones too that people are, taking their interpretation on it and building a business out of it. So it's really grown. I mean, there's, like I said, there's great barbecue places up in the Panhandle. Lubbock's got some really awesome ones. Yeah, there's just a lot out there.
It is. Oh yeah. You gotta
And
like pepper.
I don't want to throw shade on it either, but we've also got some really awesome Tex-Mex. You get out to the El Paso region, there is some amazing Tex-Mex and true Mexico dishes out in El Paso and South Texas that are second to none. Such a diverse flavor, and of course a good old Texas steak is always in there as well. Seafood on the coast.
Texas.
It's hard, Rennie.
Listen, this is why I love Texas. Diverse geography, diverse people.
Yep.
The food diversity is incredible. And of course, my love for weather. We can find all kinds there. So, Matthew, this has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate your time and experience sharing with us today. You're a great representative. Your work's really important. And people, I think, take departments of transportation for granted, that it's just a service provided. But I'm here to tell you, in my work, I get to see how impactful and how important and how much care a DOT takes for the weather. And Texas is certainly no different. And just really appreciate your insights. This has been a very fun conversation.
Absolutely, Rennie. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to get to visit with you about Texas and our environments and how the weather impacts us. So really appreciate this opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for listening and joining us here on DTNsights. I hope you found this to be a great conversation, and